Good morning. Welcome to this, what I said earlier, amazing panel that is coming up for you this morning. This is the 4th International Climate Change Adaptation Conference, and it's the first time in its history, I'm told, that a business day is being organized. So this morning, for those of you who came unaware, you will see a lot of business people on this panel. Should that be a problem for you, you have about 10 seconds to leave the room. Otherwise, you will find out they are just like any other human being on the planet and as much part of society as anyone else in the room. Welcome to Rotterdam. There is no more fitting place in the world to organize the Adaptation Conference, the 4th Adaptation Conference, because this city, as some of you may know, lies below sea level. Just up the road, there's the lowest lying golf course on the planet, which I know is a completely irrelevant topic when you talk adaptation, but if sea levels rise, this city will be impacted before many other cities in the planet. And it is an absolute economic center of activity, still the biggest harbor in Europe and in the top 5, I guess, of the world harbors. So lots of logistics and supply chains run across the river and the harbor that you can see out of these windows. It's great for us to be here today because, as we all know, the Paris Agreement has completely changed the landscape for climate change, not only because 193 governments in the world have now signed up to the Paris Accord and all the preparation that went into it. And I'm sure those of you who listened to Christiana Figueres yesterday will have heard with what amount of hard work that has happened. But also because it will bring the conversation on what are we going to do about climate change. In our minds, mitigation, i.e. the reduction or the attempts to reduce emissions, are a crucial part of the mix and has for many years already seen business get involved. Some of the business leaders that I will introduce briefly and shortly to you have done lots of work on mitigating the effects or the emissions going forward and therefore fighting climate change. It's been a lot harder, strange enough in some ways, to get business involved in the adaptation discussion. That's why we're happy to be part of organizing this session, to have that conversation. Why is it difficult for business? What should business do? And what are the solutions that are at hand? The other big breakthrough in my mind in Paris was that the world for the first time stopped dividing itself in government and science and business and cities. We all came together and have come to the conclusion that if we want to fix climate change, we have to do this together. My argument would be that applies to adaptation as much as it does to mitigation. So again, great to have this panel. All of you in the room can and are asked to participate. I'll introduce the panel for you, and then we'll have a conversation with the panelists, but about midway in the session, we will move over to you, for you to ask any questions, to have a dialogue with the business leaders here on stage. But people can also, and I am frantically looking in my papers, which of course is completely at loss at this point in time, for a Twitter address. Do you know it, Rasmus? Oh, it's up the screen. Great. Well, at Adaptation Pace. If you hashtag Adaptation Pace is the modern language, I believe. Hashtag Adaptation Pace. That's where you can tweet your questions. We can somehow see those on the screen and then pick the winning questions for the debate with panelists. Of course, we'll have roaming mics as well, going around the room, so anyone who feels courageous enough to ask questions, please feel totally free to do that. Let me now introduce the panel for you. I'll do it in the order that they are in the bio, and give him a warm hand of applause, please. Mr. Feike Sijbesma, the CEO of DSM. Morning. Sandeep Dadlani, the Executive Vice President, Head of America of Infosys, India-based company. Hi, Sandeep. Mr. David Walker, Chief Development Officer of DNV GL Group. I don't know, Roger Steens, or is it Roger Steens? Roger Steens, Director Sustainability, Tata Steel Europe. And now they've invited two panelists, which is the attempt to have me break my tongue, so stay with me. Frank Goossensen, he's the Director Water Europe of Arcadis. And the very best for last, Christina Tørklep Meisingset. Wow, that's okay. Key Account Manager of IBKA. So, thank you all for coming out. Let me just do a run this way in the panel. Now, as I said before, in the run-up to Paris, business is really focused on mitigation. What does the Paris Agreement mean for your business, and where does adaptation come into that? Sandeep.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, sitting close to you, Peter, means I get the easiest questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
It's going to be tough for Roger, then.
I can handle it.
Okay.
So I represent Infosys. We are a 200,000 people global IT consulting and services firm. But think about it from a business perspective and a climate perspective as a 50 million square feet of built-up business space, having 200,000 productive people who have to be productive all the time in buildings that are consuming massive amounts of energy from a data center, computers perspective. So this is the footprint of the business. We, of course, support the world's largest organizations for their IT and business process needs. The Paris Agreement was massive. We had already, as you know, Peter, taken the lead in declaring ourselves to be part of the RE100 and the commitment to become one of the few companies in the world with a commitment to become carbon neutral by 2018. This involved amazing amount of efforts in terms of every which way we design our operations. We design a resource-efficient operation. We design our buildings. We design our footprint on the planet, the way we look at water. I know there are some prominent water experts on the panel, and so on. So this was already in place from a mitigation perspective. We will be carbon neutral in 1.5 years, perhaps earlier. But from an adaptation perspective, this comes to life significantly in situations like the Chennai floods in November. In November 2015, Chennai, which is a large city in South India, received about more than 1,200 millimeters of rainfall, perhaps in one day compared to an entire month. So in one day, they received a month's worth of rainfall. It disrupted at least 20 plus global players and their operations there. It brought down more than $10 billion of business was lost that day, and another $50 billion of market cap was disrupted. Thousands of lives were lost, but also lots of lives were destroyed simply because of the wealth lost as part of that whole process. Infosys was not disrupted at all. We had a record quarter, and I know this seems very petty in times of crisis, but it is important from an adaptation perspective. The buildings in the Chennai campus were designed with a vulnerability tests to withstand such floods. There were 10,000 dorm rooms inside so that people trapped inside can continue to stay on the campus. The orientation of the buildings, the envelope around it, the window-to-wall ratio around it, the radiant cooling systems, the chiller plants inside the buildings, they all were sensor connected and were running through artificial intelligence so that nothing ever stops. This is a prime example of adaptation at its best. All our operations are designed that way, and that is how we are preparing for the future.
Great. Thank you, Sandeep. I'll get back to that in a minute. But Feike, moving over to you. I know you've done, and your company has done an enormous amount on mitigation. You're one of the leading ambassadors for it in the world. But what does adaptation mean to you?
Adaptation means that I'm sitting here with mixed feelings, and I just said it to you, Peter. Because I think it is our moral responsibility, our societal responsibility, and maybe also our economic responsibility to take care that all the adaptation are necessary and that we can focus and solve the problems with mitigations. I think it would be immoral if all the adaptation efforts go at the expense of mitigation and passing the burden to a next generation. It would be immoral, in my view, if the collective failure of mitigation becomes a successful business driver for business in the future. On the other hand, it would be immoral as well if the inevitable problems which will arise are not being addressed via adaptation. So I agree that we should work on adaptation, but I cannot escape from the feeling that I'm sitting there and do that with very strong mixed feelings, because it should focus even more on the mitigation for me. As you know, I feel very much stimulated by Paris. I think Paris is a turning point. First time that almost 200 countries really committed themselves to do something. And in itself, what we agreed in Paris should trigger adaptation of companies. I say to many companies, the world will change after Paris. There will come a price on carbon. We will anchor addressing climate change in our economic system via a carbon price. So you need, first of all, adaptation, not to help the world, adaptation to adapt yourself. You need to change your own company. If not, you will belong to the cohort of losers, because every change will trigger winners and losers. Now, as a company, you can still change to be a winner, but that means you need to adapt your company. What can we do as a company to help the adaptation? A lot of things. We work in the nutritious area. I mean, due to flooding, due to droughts, we will get areas with a strong shortage of micronutrients. And then we need to give immediate help to enrich food, because otherwise we get stunted people, and stunted people are lost forever. You cannot readdress stunting later on by giving nutritious food. We can help with having all kinds of anti-molds when temperature rises and there's floods and there is molds in all kinds of post-harvest things. We can address that. All kinds of effects of air pollution via our vitamin systems, etc., to take care that you do not have lung diseases and all those things. But think about the solutions that innovation, circular economy can bring. I mean, numerous things, even new business models, which can be interesting for business and interesting for society to adapt. But I close, Peter, by saying it. I remain doing that, and I hope you don't mind, but a little bit with a mixed feeling.
Good. We'll grill you on that a bit later. Good. Christine, you're currently employed by the NG Group, waste management and the likes. You have a past, made a name for yourself in linking sustainability to value management. If you think about the Paris Agreement, and particularly adaptation, and link it to your current and past life, what do you say?
In IBKA, we do industrial cleaning and tank cleaning. In the NG Group, we're in waste management and recycling, a leading player in the Nordics. And our ambition as a company is to be an agent for circular economy and smarter resource utilization. And there is, in that, there's a need for education and actually bringing this topic, make this topic climb on the agenda overall. And the resource squeeze that we're in globally I think is a good way of addressing these topics. However, it's not directly, adaptation does not hit us directly, I would say. From my previous work in finance and analyzing listed companies globally, I've seen a lot of good work on mitigation, but very little adaptation built into strategy, which is really what we need, right? I think for the Nordics, business isn't really feeling the heat. We're not really affected by the drought, by the extreme weather. We do see some minor changes, but I think, to be honest, it's not until we actually feel that this is hitting us that we'll take real action. I think we're now starting to see there's a supply chain risk, and that is being acted on by leading companies, and also obviously by insurance, because that's what they do. But generally, this needs to be addressed in a much broader sense. The beauty of adaptation, though, is that it can be counted and calculated, and you can put a price on, even though there's huge uncertainty and very not very predictable. But you can actually demonstrate the costs that business will have if this happens, or this happens, right? So and costs and risk do actually climb into the boardrooms of business. So maybe there's something in the language there and the label that we put on it, because adaptation is very, how can I say, it's not very accessible in a way. But if you call it climate risk, I think, oh yeah, there's some risk there. There's a cost there that we need to address.
Great. Thank you. Moving to Frank, you're with Arcadis, one of the leading engineering firms, and you're the director of water. I always say that water is the language that Mother Nature uses to scream at people, by either giving it too little or too much. So what do you say when you think adaptation?
I think water always tells the truth, sooner or later. But we as Arcadis, we are a consulting and engineering firm. We have 28,000 people, so it sounds a lot, but it's, well, compared with other companies around the table, very small as well. Look at the total world, it's also very small. So let's say we are, well, very minor if you look at the whole world. But our footprint, looking at the clients that we serve, is, let's say, 10 times, multiply 10 times higher, because the impact on all the investments is very high. So if you look at water, which is a very tangible thing and very, very, well, you can feel it, you can see it everywhere, or you cannot see it everywhere because it is completely missing. If you look at the water, what we try to do always with talking with our clients, let's say you can just look at climate change or future development as a risk. You have few scenarios, you look at it as a risk, and then you end up in a mitigation kind of solution. But if you look one step further, you see, okay, how can I improve my competitiveness, or how can I improve my performance, or how can I, let's say, become more social responsive, or how can I get a better evaluation or better perception by the general public? I think then you can take one step further, and you can look at adaptation by drastically reducing your footprint, or by very carefully selecting the locations where you build your new facility for production, if there's enough water, or do we have to change the whole water cycle in the company. You can look at the total impact of the water consumption, also at other elements like energy consumption. Water and energy, I think, go hand by hand. So what we try to do working with our clients is to be impactful, and that goes just beyond mitigation, and also to see if you can go to one step further. Be prepared also as a city, or as an investor, or as a developer, or as an industry. Be prepared for future success as well. And then I think you can go to this adaptation point.
And as a consulting engineering firm, do you offer specific adaptation services to clients?
Yeah, we do. Also, we are working within the World Business Council for Sustainable Development on a project called 5R. I always forget these 5R. So it's about reuse, recovery, reduction, and it's a tool we want that we're providing to our clients just to carefully assess the total water consumption and to come to solutions as well that are economical, sound, and beneficial for the company and directly applicable. And yesterday we launched, another example, yesterday we launched the Sustainable City Water Index, where we assessed 50 cities around the world on resiliency, water quality, and efficiency, and also sub-indicators below. And just say providing cities with insights on where they are performing good or bad, and where they can improve to be ready for the challenges of the future. So
Great.
providing tools, helping them, training them, and implementing.
Cool. Thanks. David Walker, Paris Agreement. You have a long history in energy and energy-related businesses and adaptation. Where does that take your mind?
So as a company, it takes our mind post-COP21 to the areas that we work in. So as a company, the NVGL's purpose is safeguarding life, property, and the environment. And we do that in two different ways. We either certify independent certification against international standards, for instance, or alternatively, we provide consulting services on how that certification can be achieved, or indeed on individual projects. So that's one thing that we actually do. So looking at those standards post-COP21, they're going to require the international standards to change. So the standards, whether it be management standards, safety, environment, construction, etc., are going to have to reflect the needs for adaptation. So we're working with the bodies like CENLEC and potentially ISO of how do those standards evolve in the future, because obviously that's very important that people then show we are certified against the best industry's best practice, and therefore we're reducing risk by doing so. So that's a very important part of our future business. But in areas where there aren't international standards, so we are the world's largest class society for ships. So one of the things we're looking at there, for instance, is climate change is driving extreme weather events, which are driving things like rogue waves, so waves that are higher, steeper, have more force than perhaps previously were there in the water. So we're looking at our standards that we have for ships, for offshore oil and gas platforms. And why is that important? Because obviously a lot of energy is still produced in the offshore environment, but in shipping, almost like 80% of the world's goods at some stage are on board a ship. So we need to make sure that shipping is safe and is adapted to climate change. In the area of energy that you mentioned, Peter, more broadly, and also in life sciences, we're looking at how do we develop ability to forecast the impact of extreme events and make sure that infrastructure of our clients' businesses are adapted. And that can be through modeling programs that look at the effect of prediction of hurricane, storm surge, high winds on ports and coastal developments. It can look at how changing rain patterns can affect landslides, etc., that displace, again, infrastructure and affect farming, etc. So we're trying to, if you like, create a number of services that reflect the needs to adapt. We're also looking at how both standards need to reflect that as well. But I must say at the same time, and I agree with Feike, is we need to make sure that we continue with the effort on the mitigation side too, and of course we're doing a lot in that area as well.
Okay. Great. Roger, Tata Steel Europe. I mean, some of your plants are very close to the sea. Does that mean that adaptation is important?
Adaptation is very important. It impacts on how you do your risk assessment. In light of the question around the Paris Agreement and how it impacted Tata and the Tata Group, I think it's important to understand the cultural perspective of the Tata Group that is rooted and started, of course, in Indian society 145 years ago. And the mission of Jamsetji Tata was to develop the Indian society and help community to overcome challenges. So if anything, the Paris Agreement was, to us, a reconfirmation that you need to put sustainability in the heart of your strategy. That results in equal attention to climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And it's in the very heart of the Tata Group in any way. And maybe 145 years later, the nature and the origins of the challenges have changed due to climate change, but there are still challenges for society, and as a company, we need to be aware of them, understand our responsibilities, our responsibility to sustain our own business and implement the appropriate risk management, but also responsibilities to understand the opportunities and threats for taking the business forward. So much more a reconfirmation than and a further strengthening of the attention than, let's say, a start, because we started 145 years ago.
Great. Okay, I'll go into a series of questions, and short and snappy answers are appreciated. And dialogue between panelists is allowed, by the way. I haven't spelled that out, but Feike, I've clearly heard your moral call that we cannot work on adaptation at the cost of mitigation, and I totally agree with that. At the same time, you're running a company which has, of the panelists here, probably most of global supply chains, and therefore, and part of them are in agriculture-related businesses, and therefore, climate impacts in some corner of the world will attack your business. When I say there has got to be a business case for adaptation, your supply chains, what is your answer to that?
Yeah, of course. I think everybody need to realize, and I hope everybody does, that the climate change itself will trigger two types of adaptations. One adaptation has to come with the effects of climate change, and the other adaptation has to come from the mitigating actions of addressing climate change. If I start with the last one first, we will take as society a lot of mitigating actions around climate change. A price on carbon, hopefully, will be one of those. And therefore, you need to adapt your business models that you can deal with an increased cost of your carbon resources if you need those. And we, for example, have some carbon resources which we use, and therefore we use an internal price of 50 euros per ton. Now already, we don't pay that because we don't have an ETS system which is working in Europe, but we are already future-proofing our business. And that counts for all. And we are positioning, we are preparing ourselves for a situation that soon the world will look different due to the mitigating actions. Now, the other thing is indeed adaptation due to the fact that the world will look less nice, that all kinds of supply chains will be disrupted in agriculture. Countries where you normally would source from will have temporary reductions or will be out of service because of floods or droughts or whatever. Then you need to take care that you can work with different type of suppliers or help your suppliers that they remain into service. And I think the circle economy here can help us very much. We are thinking increasingly, how can we not only take material, consume it, and dispose the waste, but how can we, together with our suppliers, set up a circular system? And we do that increasingly also with our customers.
A company like Unilever, since about 2 years, is disclosing that they have $370 million of additional cost as a result of weather disruptions in their supply chains. Is a company like DSM measuring that type of damage? And if so, are you going to be transparent about it?
Yeah, if we would have it, I would immediately be transparent and use that as an argument to mitigate actions even further. But to be honest, I have difficulties calculating. We do not have seen those kind of damages. Most likely we will have some damages in the order of magnitude of a couple of millions. But even tens of millions or hundreds of millions already today, if you're referring to that, I don't see that for our company. Okay. But it could happen in the future.
Okay. Christine, you wanted to add to this.
I think Feike's point on collaboration is key, and really what we're seeing is that when we sit together, different players in the same value chain or value circle, that is really when we can make real change. To your question on the business case, that the challenge of that is that depends on what industry are you in, what region are you in, what type of company are you, and there's not. Maybe that's the challenge also that you're feeling. We're lacking good data sets, right? Even though it's possible to calculate, it's going to be, it's still very immature and not very tangible for many industries. But overall, and on a very rough line, ecosystems are under pressure, already affecting cash flows of companies. Regulatory requirements are shifting. And that will often lead to an increase in costs for business. Consumers and big procurement also are increasingly asking questions about environmental footprints and impacts. If you add to that the fact that the majority of the economic growth will be in markets where the ecosystems are under the most stress and regulations are the most immature and consumers are feeling the heat, then that should be reason enough to start working on those calculations and start building those data sets that you need to understand this.
The follow on Christine, the Financial Stability Board has recently launched a task force for climate-related financial disclosures, which at the end of this year, if you don't know what it is, will come up with recommendations on what companies and asset management companies should disclose to their shareholders or to their investors on what the climate-related risks in their portfolios is, either because they make their money based on fossil fuels or potentially also because there are adaptation risks. From your past life, is there enough attention in that part of thinking on adaptation, or is it all on mitigation?
No, there's not enough attention at all. It's in finance. My view is that there's most of the focus is on equities on the equity side, whereas maybe most of the power is on the bond side. Also, reporting and disclosure is one part of this game, but what we really need is courageous chief investment officers who leave behind what they learned in business school and what they did in the past 20 years, and actually say, well, look at these trends, look at how our frameworks are shifting for business. This is how we need to invest going forward. I mean, it's a lot about courage and not so much about reporting, I would say.
Great. Let me do a test if the audience is still awake. Who of you are from... No questions yet. I get to ask the questions. Hang on. Who of you represents government? Thank you. Who represents cities? It's the same. It's also government, right? I know, but... Who represents business? And who represents science? That's pretty cool. And who represents NGOs, civil society? And anyone we've missed, like, I'm just here to have a good time, or... So,
I think this is a very nice test, and it shows, I think, the importance of two words in all this, and that is that we all together need to take a holistic approach and create a holistic understanding on what's required, and then an integrated route forward. As an example, you mentioned that we have an industrial site close to the sea. So we have a responsibility to be part of that area, which is on the one hand making sure that there's an economic livelihood, but at the same time the right ecosystem, recreational system, logistical system. And unless you sit around the table with all these parties and understand the issues, you can understand the trade-offs and the risks together and take a joined-up responsibility.
Yep. No, it's great. And I think in this community, the adaptation community, the signals that I have been picking up is the dialogue has been missing so far. And I think I really, in 15 minutes, I'll open the floor for all of you to bang your questions and enter into the dialogue, but let me continue for a little bit. Sandeep, I mean, in the Paris negotiations, it were particularly the emerging or developing countries that were asking for adaptation or resilience to be part of the agreement. Like you said, you're an India-based origin company. You've got your house in order in the Chennai example. So two questions, actually. Why are the emerging countries so much more focused on this in those global negotiations? And secondly, it's of course great that Infosys had a record quarter when the rest of the city went underwater. But what are you going to do for the rest of the city?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Well, the traditional argument for emerging countries has been that, look, the developed countries have already improved the state of their infrastructure. They're enjoying a better quality of life. The per capita consumption of energy and resources is much higher for the developed world. Now, why are you setting the rules the same for both emerging and developed countries? You should allow us to develop as well. You should allow us to enjoy the resources. I feel that argument is flawed. Although I represent an Indian origin company, I don't think the argument is correct. At this point in time, there is a crisis. And in a crisis, where you came from doesn't matter. What you do now matters. So whether you're an emerging country or a developed country or you're somewhere in between or you're in a ship at sea, we all better do our best, both in terms of, as Feike rightly said, mitigation and adaptation. There is no or here. There has to be an and. Mitigation and adaptation both in full force, and that would be my first recommendation. What gives me hope and what gives me particular excitement, and this is perhaps a biased argument, is adaptation is first about prediction. You see, you can adapt well to something that you can see coming versus reacting to something that has happened. And so let's change the word a little bit here. And if all of us in the room can think about prediction, I think Christine said something very interesting earlier. She said there are not enough data sets to predict and hence to adapt in some level. And I would argue that advancements in technology, being a technology firm, so this was coming eventually, in the last 2 years in particular, advancements in artificial intelligence and advancements in big data allows us to use all the data sets available to predict better and adapt better. So for example, coming to your second question, which is the Chennai example, we were not just keeping track of all our employees in Chennai and their families. We had set up help desks and centers in cities around Chennai, which were safe, to highlight through social networks which areas were the most flooded, where were people in danger, which places need the most food. In a disaster situation, the biggest problem is not resources. The Indian Army was there, everybody was around trying to help. The biggest problem was who needs what? Do they need to be rescued? Do they need food? Do they need water? You don't know. You can't send everything everywhere. So there was an Infosys ecosystem at work, leveraging technology, trying to get the right resources to the right places around the society. In the agriculture example that Feike very well mentioned, there is an interesting experiment going on, one in our Palo Alto labs and one in the Hyderabad campus. There are 2 prototypes of digital farms being developed where there are about thousands of sensors in these farms trying to build plants and crops of different varieties using these thousands of sensors, but literally digitally controlling them through various extremes of nature. Now I have a digital twin of a farm that I can control on my computer. As nature changes or as nature threatens to change, I am trying to control that agricultural farm through a computer. So my humble submission to this audience is that the way to make it and, today there's an or there is some compromise, there's a mixed feeling, as Feike very articulately mentioned, mixed feeling of are we defocusing on mitigation? Is technology, is new capabilities like artificial intelligence, is new capabilities of handling data sets to try and make our focus unlimited towards both mitigation and adaptation.
Great. Feike, you wanted to add?
Yeah, may I respond on this? And I try maybe to sharpen the debate a little bit, Sandeep, also, because Peter offered you the opportunity as the only representative for so-called developing countries to plead for the defense of the developing countries, and you say, well, I don't fully agree with the argument, so then I was looking around in the panel, so somebody needs to take it up.
Now you're the developing country.
So, exactly.
Off you go, Mark.
So let me take up the role for the developing countries then. Because you said, Peter, in the introduction, yeah, Rotterdam is below sea level, etc. Yeah, it's all fine, and I don't know whether there are people from the city of Rotterdam here, most likely, and of course, I lived here also for 10 years, so I feel sorry for you if we run into problems. But before all of that, who runs into problems is the south of Bangladesh. 50 million people who basically already today cannot live there. Who first run into problems, 120 million people in the Horn of Africa, who already today, in fact, cannot live there. And if I take only those two areas, I talk about 170 million people. Now today we have 60 million refugees in the world, mainly due to violence. We have not so many refugees due to climate change. I think I would not be amazed if the next couple of decades we get a couple of hundreds millions of more refugees due to climate change. Well, we cannot handle the 60 million refugees already today in the world. So why would we be so confident that we can handle 250 million refugees? I think that will cause political tension, geopolitical tension, tension in our own countries, migration we cannot handle, etc. So we need to address not only the problems of Rotterdam, but we need to address the problems of India or Bangladesh or South Horn of Africa. And here, Peter, I have a problem. The money flows are like that those areas which urgently need it, and even we need it, that it's being addressed there, otherwise we cannot handle the migration issues, that money flows work very poorly. Now, does the private sector have the technologies, the innovative power, etc., to help on the adaptation? Yes. Can you turn that into a business model because the money flows are there? No. Unless, indeed, in the Paris Agreement, the 100 billion per year, which we agreed, and by the way, India was one of the big negotiators to get their money, is turning into a business model, we can do it. And I believe that there is an argument for the developing countries to be supported financially by the richer countries, and to, even in the interest of the richer countries, to develop a financial business model to help them in their interest, in our moral obligation, but to be honest, at the end of the day, also out of self-interest.
I'm in any case very happy to see that you've cleared up your own mixed feelings about the topic of adaptation. David, picking up signals from the meeting here yesterday, is it fair to say that when it comes to climate mitigation, following and in the run-up to the Paris Agreement, business is now ahead of governments, moving fast, building solutions, trying to scale them up, and in some sense has moved ahead of science as well? If I look at adaptation, science seems to be ahead of business, and business is struggling to catch up. Given that you do a lot of development of tools for businesses to think about adaptation, how closely are you related to the science community in adaptation? Are we building enough collaboration? Do we get the best knowledge in the house?
I'm not sure that we do have the right bridges that you're describing. I must admit I spent some time at one of the sessions here yesterday and was a little bit surprised. It almost sounded like private enterprise or business was, from the research community, was almost like an alien group that needed to be reached out and touched. And at the same time, I'm not sure that many companies are spending their R&D money on addressing adaptation issues as opposed to new products and other ventures. So there's definitely a gap there that I think needs to be closed. I think there are various ways of doing that. So, there are projects that are trying to bring business and science together. Some of the EU 2020 Horizon projects, for instance, are examples. But we need more of that, I think, to encourage the gap to be closed for sure. Because the difficulty, I think, is that if business may not get access then to the best solutions of all the brightest minds spread across all the different universities, but equally, I think we need solutions that are pragmatic, and we need them sooner rather than later, because that's what we need to address. And the danger is that if science starts to go around, too many blind avenues or theoretical avenues, we don't end up with pragmatic solutions. So I believe your statement is correct. We do need to come closer together.
Okay. Well, I take it the scientists in the room can use that as an invite and exchange business cards. Frank, a similar question. Our experience has been that it's easy to mobilize businesses around mitigation, finding solutions for reduction of emissions. It's still tougher to get them involved in the adaptation type of solutions. I mean, you are a company selling consulting services to businesses without disclosing publicly sensitive information. What is the growth rate or growth opportunity that you, for your company, see in selling adaptation-related tools and services to business? Is that picking up, or do you see a similar this unbalance?
Well, as a matter of fact, that's I'm pretty sure we don't have these kind of figures in detail. But I can tell you out of my own experience, we've been working on climate adaptation for quite some time already. See how we can support governments, cities, private clients to be ready for changes in the future. And the signals are there already for decades that it's a rather serious problem. But so far, our business in that area typically hardly grew at all. It is kind of amazing because we have 1,800 people discussing it in conferences like this every other week. So every week, probably every day. So quite a few people are discussing it, and implementation in the end is limited. So, but does it mean that I don't see any perspective? No, not at all. We see, let's say, that's probably it takes a lot of time building on the discussion on the connection with the academic world. At the moment, we have way more tangible and way more specific tools and solutions available that we can implement from a helicopter view far ahead, and we are now able to go to very specific, detailed solutions on how to really implement either mitigation or adaptation. So I see, I'm always an optimist. So I see also in this, I see way more and more signals that companies and investors and developers and governments are ready to invest and really take the action. In the Netherlands, for water management, it's quite obvious. We do it for decades already. We have this Delta plan. We Delta Commissioner implementing Be Ready for 2100, taking the no regret steps that you can take already now. And these no regret things that we see them more and more also being implemented. You don't know exactly what to do because probably you're missing the data, but at least you know these things are a no-brainer. They help on mitigation, adaptation, makes your business solid and sound and stable for future. And then it's difficult to see if it's adaptation or mitigation or business as usual, but at least it's kind of soaked into all kinds of activities. There's hardly any advice that we make that's not related to sustainability or green buildings or zero emission or energy consumption or let's say participation of the general public, designing their own neighborhood. So I can't separate it anymore, which I could, let's say, 5-10 years ago. But it's way more integrated in all the things that we do.
David?
No, I just wanted to emphasize, I think, that point is that, some solutions are good for mitigation are also for adaptation. If you take renewable energy, for instance, so if you compare renewable energy to thermal generated energy, largely coal-fired plants, and you look at the stress that those coal-fired plants, because they require cooling water, are putting on the water system. So almost like 60% of American thermal power is in water-stressed areas. 60% of China's thermal power is an area where only 20% of the fresh water is for cooling. But if you look at the amount of energy that's used, water rather used by renewable energy, per kilowatt hour generated is about 1/600th or less. So moving to renewable energy not only reduces emissions and therefore is an important factor in mitigation, it actually from an adaptation standpoint, particularly in the water economy, drastically reduces the amount of water that's going to be used. So in a country like the UK, for instance, if it actually meets its renewables targets in 2030, it will use half as much water as it did in 2000 to address its energy needs. If we can do that more globally and expand renewables, it will answer the mitigation question, but it also has an important adaptation impact as well.
Frank and David, are any of your firms beginning to work closely with insurance companies? Because I would expect in business they are the front runners because they're going to pay the bills if we do not adapt and get hit by the impact. So is there any collaboration evolving in that space?
Yeah, we do. Yesterday during dinner I was sitting next to someone from a reinsurer and we were discussing what they are impacted, their results depend...
But since last night doesn't count, I mean...
That's right, that's just an example, but before that as well. But they are heavily impacted by, especially by natural disasters. Yeah. So having that under control, it means to be able to predict, coming back to data, is key for them. And they are thinking also about rethinking their model. Is it only about insuring, also taking preventive measures to avoid that a disaster take place? And we're helping them on that.
I think it's an important question because, in fact, DNV was originally formed and Management Lloyd are a partner by the insurance clubs of Norway and Germany to make sure that ships were designed, built and operated safely so that they didn't have to pay such large insurance bills. So we've carried on that relationship with those industries, but probably in adaptation there's certainly room to, we're doing some work, but there's certainly room for a lot more work, I think, in that area. So I think the insurers, in fact, should be an important driver in how companies actually look at adaptation going forward, not only for their own assets, but for the business as a whole, because, again, back to the supply chain question.
I told you
well,
this
is very interesting, Peter, to see the annual results of a lot of bigger, at least European insurance companies over 2015, without mentioning names, but a couple of companies, I would love to almost name the names, who ran into really some serious financial issues over 2015 because the level of claims due to level of flooding, especially in the UK, was much higher than anticipated. And they find out that their predictions models, which are all based on history, what else do you have, doesn't work anymore. So they need to rethink the business model for the future. And for some of them said, I need to anticipate that the level of claims go up. So I need to anticipate, even before I have the proof, that your premiums you pay will go up, which for businesses who need to be insured, I mean, is a very weird model. So you're going to assume that it will go worse, you don't know yet, and you're already asking me for more money. The answer is yes. Otherwise, we don't survive. So we will run into these kind of debates.
I've been in meetings between business leaders and insurance leaders where getting more premium wasn't enough. They just declare areas uninsurable.
That's even worse.
Yes. That's the next step. I want to move to Roger. He's been asking for the microphone.
Yeah, you were talking about the difficulty about mobilizing businesses around climate mitigation versus adaptation. And I think that there's a few striking differences between the two. The level of awareness on climate change and mitigation is much higher. And there's a burning platform and a business case that you can develop as a company on your own. Because you can, for instance, the carbon price, you can cost it into your business case going forward. Now, with adaptation, it is different. The level of awareness and the level of integration in risk management is much lower. The business case is much more complex because there's many stakeholders involved. And it is a longer-term issue. So how do you decide on that? And it requires visionary leadership, not only of industries, but of everybody working together. And that is something that requires a new way of working. And to relate that to insurance companies, in their business model, the knowledge of risk is their source of making money. But maybe they should share the knowledge of risk to mitigate the risk going forward and define a new business model with their partners. So the lack of business models, the complexity, the lack of an immediate bottom line effect to your company, that makes it very much harder to develop business adaptation business models than mitigation. And I think that is part of the reason why it is slowly.
Roger, I think you gave a fair reflection on why companies occasionally still struggle to think through the risks of adaptation. And the nature of the beast of business, for those of you who don't know business, is they get a lot more excited, a lot faster about business opportunities.
Yeah.
So you're running a steel company. I mean, adaptation in my mind means bigger, stronger wind turbines, higher walls, bigger dikes, a lot more steel. So is this good news for you?
Well, as I said, we take a holistic approach to its sustainability, and we need to recognize the risks and the opportunities. I think what is important for society is to, yes, we need to take responsibility in the production phase. But the real key to climate change mitigation and adaptation, certainly also to provide welfare for the masses that still do not have that welfare, is to provide responsible consumption. And if you provide responsible consumption and through the life cycle of a product, you offer something that delivers CO2 efficiency, yeah, the more CO2 efficient the world becomes, the more we can share consumption in a fair way. So to us as a steel company, it is important that our material is being recognized as a provider for CO2 efficiency. And I'm not saying you should use steel in all occasions, but society must realize which material should you use for which product to optimize the CO2 efficiency of the world. And that is, I think, in the heart of the business model going forward. And it requires a lot of knowledge for people to make that assessment. And it's a very complex thing, sustainability. It's the management of dilemmas, yeah, that are not interrelated. Yeah? You cannot do one trade-off and take a table and then say, okay, I have the answer. So it requires a lot of information to people to say, hey, I recognize this is the best solution for this problem, and that is the best solution for that problem. And there's a place for all materials in that.
Christine.
I think that's a good point, the complexity. And I think we have a tendency, all of us in the room, I'm sure, have a tendency to make this very academic. We talk about, we have phrases that most people haven't even heard of. It makes it really difficult to get a broad understanding and acceptance of the risks and the opportunities, which is really what it boils down to. My role in IBKA and NG Group is to bring out those risks and opportunities and the circular economy thinking to our clients. When I do that, my experience so far is most of the people in management understand what we're talking about. Most of the people in procurement don't have a clue of what we're talking about. And they couldn't care less. All they look at is the price of the hour that they have to pay per hour of industrial cleaning service, or the price per ton of waste handled, right? So there's a whole different mindset. We need to help them understand that you have to look at the whole chain of costs and environmental impacts in what you procure and what you source. So there's maybe this experience can be used in other areas too. I think we need to make it simple when we talk about this, and use really clear examples on how big this cost can be, or how interesting this opportunity can be, and try not to be too academic.
Great. Time to move to the audience. Is there anyone who has a question for any of the panelists? If so, please say your name, who you represent, and if you have a directed question, who you would like to direct it to. There's one person here.
Sorry, throw it.
And the lady here.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm Olivier Maas, the CEO of Just Dig It. And first, thanks for organizing this panel. I think it's a great discussion. Would have been great to have maybe the insurance companies and the extraction companies as well on the table, because I think they have a fairly long-term vision and already do quite a bit. And maybe some tech companies, in our experience, some of the new disruptors. Yes, but some of the new disruptors, companies which were not there 5 years ago, also have a quite interesting view on climate and the issues related to that. But in my experience, and we spent quite a bit of time with the private sector to try to involve them in our restoration projects, how do I get you guys to think beyond optimizing your supply chain? Because a lot of the responses we get is, well, actually, we try to do as much as we can in our value chain, because that's the nature of entrepreneurship and private sector. Let's fix our own supply chain first. We're climate neutral, so we're fine. You know, so that's then how do you move beyond the fact that your supply chain might be clean? You know, you talk to some of the large telecom operators, they say they're 100% climate neutral, but then that doesn't really solve the problem that we're talking about. You talked about the Horn of Africa, the fact that a large telecom company here is 100% carbon neutral or climate neutral does not help them. So how do I get the case beyond a philanthropic-minded CEO to think down the organization that there's a broader responsibility, because climate change is just a worldwide problem, and it's not a problem that you can address just here in the Netherlands. So be willing to hear your response to that.
Any volunteers, or shall I?
I can. I think a pragmatic way has to be figuring out linkages to business goals. And this may not sound right. The right answer should have been the philanthropic CEO should make everybody in the company philanthropic and just do good for the world. But if there are clever ways, intelligent ways, to link the business goals with a larger good for society, it helps. Let me give you an illustration. We said we will be carbon neutral in the next 1.5 years. And so besides trying to completely get our campuses off the grid and relying on solar, we will obviously purchase some carbon offsets. Now there is a choice every company here gets. You can procure cheap carbon offsets, or you can actually try and do projects which largely benefit society. I would imagine you would argue that we should do the latter, although the easy and convenient thing is to do the former. However, it is also clear to me that for us as Infosys, talent and computer-educated talent from all parts of the world is important for my business, for my industry, and perhaps for all industries. And therefore, we are choosing to do a lot more projects in household biogas around villages around Infosys or in different poor parts of Bangladesh, Africa, etc., because that allows me access to villages, talent, and eventually education. Education then allows me to create a larger talent pool of technology-educated people, which in a strange long-term way helps my business as well. This is a convoluted way of trying to link societal goals with my business goals. It is still the best way to get business people motivated at scale, beyond the philanthropic CEO and a couple of leaders, to drive towards larger good. That would be my suggestion.
I don't like this word of the philanthropic CEO. There are a few of them, and I'm sometimes called one of them also, and I try to correct people. I look different to what a business is, and I think that is part of the solutions also. If you look to a business which is primarily there to make profit for its shareholders, full stop, and of course not totally screwing up the world and taking a little bit care of the planet and a little bit care of society, and we don't do it too bad. But that's not our prime goal as business. Our prime goal is just to make money for shareholders. If that is your way of business, then we were not going to make it. And this is not my philosophy of doing business. I believe in this people, planet, profit concept. We have a prime goal as businesses, since we have the power and we have the innovative tools in hand to provide value for the planet, also to provide value for society as well. So I would like to escape a little bit from this philanthropic point of view. But of course, the moment you can anchor it in your economic model, therefore I'm stimulating so much a price on carbon, then it runs a little bit faster with all CEOs in the world, also those who don't get it, because it's anchored then in their economic model. I'm still struggling with anchoring in any economic model that those countries who need it the most, the innovations of the business society, do not have the financial means to pay for that. And that in the Paris Treaty, I hope we can change that momentum a little bit, because then they can also benefit from that innovative power.
I think there's another element which is also important. I mean, your question was, how do I get you guys to step on board and do that? And one part of the answer is indeed the realization of a business that it is to provide value to all stakeholders. But what you can do for businesses is recognizing that there's a huge difference with taking care of the Horn of Africa versus, let's say, quoting for an infrastructural work, because an individual company can quote for an individual bridge or something like that. But if you want to take care of Bangladesh or the Horn of Africa, what type of engagement is required for all parties to step into an overall business case? And building that platform and facilitating that dialogue is something that individual companies would require to make that business assessment. So that is, I think, my answer to your question. How do you get us on board?
So the only way to keep this dialogue interesting is if you ask short questions and the panel gives brief answers. I'm going to take 3 questions at the same time. The lady here first, then the gentleman, and then the sir in the back. Brevity is appreciated.
My first...
Just speak.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, so my direct questions to you, you have talked about international business, but adaptation about making changes in the ground. So how have you contributed, or how will companies contribute to small and medium enterprises and community directly? And have companies considered about the impacts that they have done in the past and try to make it as a way to contribute to the societies? By the way, my name is Rianti from Indonesia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second question, behind you.
I'm Rod Keenan from the University of Melbourne in Australia, and adaptation can often be broken into incremental adaptation where you're managing risk to your existing business, or transformational adaptation where you may need to move to a completely new type of business. And my question is for Feike, because your business has obviously been through some transformations over a number of times. So what advice can you give for businesses to manage transformation?
Thank you. And the sir down there, yep.
I'm Fowler Ogunyoye from Royal Hospital in DHV, based in the UK. I work a lot with government and private organizations, supporting them in understanding and trying to adapt and mitigate and increase their resilience to risks, including climate change risks. One of the major issues I find is that as you look into the issues of each company, there's a lot of interdependency of their resilience on others. In fact, I find more often that what they can do can be totally scuppered by something else, electricity, communications, and most companies want to come up with a plan and spend a lot of money in their silos, and I find that is not a resilient way to go about it. So my question is, I'm struggling to get companies to talk together and actually develop a resilient plan that works. What are your examples of how you've tried to deal with this in the past?
Okay, thank you.
Can I answer? I would like to respond on your first question about what do you do with local scale. This, if you look outside, there's in Rotterdam the Schouwburgplein, which is close to the theater, the Doelen and the cinema. And there's a local initiative or to make that square sustainable. It sounds a bit silly, make a square sustainable, but it's an involvement of local community, SME, and as Arcadis is a large company. And what I would say, key for driving initiatives, that you don't only leave it to large companies or large governmental organizations, but involve local people and SME, because they have the brains, they have some innovations as well. They live there and they have a high level of involvement. So we can use excuses like we don't have data and it's long term, but talking with people and working with people on the local level, that's key for success. And that pays off. That's kind of a multiply examples that everybody can use later on as well.
Christine, you wanted to jump in.
Sure. In my experience, there's two ways that really make change. One is a crisis that makes companies and businesses adapt and mitigate. And other is when all the different stakeholders start asking questions. When the banks start asking questions, when the clients start asking questions, when the NGOs are out there and the regulatory frameworks are changing, that makes for change. And those questions need to be asked about core business.
Okay. I think there's an analogy here, and if you look at, we have something like 70,000 customers that we do ISO 9001 certification for, largely quality directed. And I mentioned about evolution of standards. If we can get adaptation as part of some of the management system standards that companies at least are looking at it. And a lot of those 70,000 customers are small to medium enterprises. Then it becomes part of the system. And then it becomes part of that when companies are actually saying, okay, I will only actually take your services or buy your products if you're 9001 certified. Then included in that would be something that says they're addressing the adaptation issue through their management system as well. That took some time to obviously get in place, such that 9001 is almost like a given if you want to trade. So I hope that we'll get to something similar, perhaps, in the future.
Feike, you were made the question on transformative.
Yeah. One short remark on small, medium-priced enterprises. We are starting a project in Rwanda. 25,000 small farming holders will provide the raw materials for making nutritious food for the government of Rwanda, for WFP, the World Food Programme, and private people who can afford that in Rwanda. This is a joint venture setup we are starting right now, which shows this collaboration. Transformation, Christine already mentioned, most companies transform when they are deep in a crisis. And I think we have an example of our company who transformed at least twice totally, not out of a crisis, but out of a very solid analysis how the new future would look like, what kind of opportunities that will bring. And if we wait too long, that maybe at a certain moment we need to change, but then in a crisis. And the moment you change in a crisis, you will not have the means to really transform your company. Because then the assets you want to sell have no value anymore, and then it is too late, and then you run really into problems. So we sold the businesses we don't want to be active anymore when they still had value, and used that proceeds to change. Now, what do you need? You need to have the ability and the confidence intern that you can lift anchors. And if something is scary, as mankind, individually, collectively, is lifting anchors. And what I noticed in our company, the moment we lift anchors to change, immediately the whole organization, everybody, even external shareholders, where are the new anchors? Play fast, new anchors, please. Because that's one thing we want as society is certainty. And the moment of lifting an anchor needs a little bit a moment having no anchors to make a new anchor, because if you do it at the same moment, you remain on the same place. So that trust, and that has lots to do with trust, need to be there in a company.
Maybe a short practical answer to the question how you get companies to work together and engage on a discussion. An example is create an overview of all the resources infrastructure in the region. All the waste streams, all the resources streams, all and share that with companies to understand so what is still wasted, or what streams are available and are not exploited to the max. So creating overviews, collective overviews, and arranging a discussion around that. Energy infrastructure is another example. How renewable is the energy infrastructure? What do we expect for the future? And that will help companies to identify opportunities together.
And I think just to build on that, business associations, I think, have a role there as well, because in some of these issues, it's not actually about competition, it's preserving a whole industry, perhaps. And a plug for WBCSD, I mean, we've done some work on resilience of supply chains with them. One of them was around from taking maize or corn through to its different products, either through into plastics as to feedstocks or into fuel. And that was done with a variety of different companies who were all along that chain, but also there were competitors in the soft drinks industry working with us to say, okay, how can we make that whole supply chain resilient? So industry associations, people getting together in collaboration to preserve, if you like, the industry rather than looking at their own competitive position.
Thank you. Going back to the room, 3 more questions. There's one over there, second one over there, and then there's a few there. We'll get to you. There's a blonde lady on the 3rd row, in the middle. No, you go first, please.
My name is Paul van der Lof from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've committed now in Paris to finance more adaptation. Let's say if I have 100 million to spend as a government, and I'm just saying this for the example, but where would I put it? I mean, would we invest jointly in projects, or would we invest in science, or where should we put the money?
Great question. Thank you. The lady over there.
Good morning. My name is Annemarie Groot. I'm a researcher at Wageningen University and Research Center in the Netherlands. I was triggered by a remark of Mr. David Walker about the gap between science and business. I would like to ask you, what do you need from us to help you to develop a business case on adaptation?
And there's a question over there, and one over there.
My name is Anton Martens. I work a lot in Africa. I want to highlight another part of business that has not been spoken a lot about here, and that is the informal sector. The informal sector in Africa brings 55 to 65% of the GDP. It covers between 80 and 95% of the workforce, and they are really underestimated and not seen. I work with Princess of Sijbesma. She is launching an expertise hub because we think that the big opportunity for adaptation is where top-down meets bottom-up. And we see empowering the informal sector as a very big bottom-up way, the best way to create it. My question here is how you, as big companies, can contribute to the empowerment of the informal sector, which at the end of the day will bring also you significant business.
Thank you. And one more over there.
Well, my name is Luc Yankaja. I'm advocating for the decentralization of climate finance to make adaptation work at local level in LDCs. First, for adaptation to pay, it must pay for natural resources managers. And farmers are the largest investors in that regard. But why is it that none of them is in the panel? And second, could you give us a few examples of how you have actually impacted policy innovation? Because without policy innovation, adaptation will not pay. Thank you.
So the why are there no farmers in the panel is poor choice of panelists by the moderator. I take all the blame. These people are innocent. So anyone else on the other questions? Who is going to spend 100 million euros from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and on what? Yeah. That should be the easy one, right? I thought so you would take that one.
Yeah, I would immediately take that up because I'm very much pleased that the first 100 million is coming in from the government on this one. I would advise you in this country, in the Netherlands, to address really fast the sustainable provision of energy. We have very vulnerable, very gas dependent, very fossil resources dependent, very unsustainable provision of energy. That's 1/3 of the amount. The second 1/3 I would spend on science and innovation. Mother Planet is not only helped by setting targets and goodwill, but finding concrete solutions, and we need innovation. By the way, Mission Innovation Initiative by the UK, China and the US of David King is a very good example to join. And the third one, I would put into further education and rules in the financial sector to be more transparent, but also two groups who have a huge internal debate with themselves, and that is citizens and consumers. And citizens have really a good intention with the world. And the spare moments that they turn into a consumer, they forget part of their opinions. And it's good to have that dialogue between citizens and consumers.
But let me test you on that, Feike. Because you've just 5 minutes ago made a passionate speech that developing countries are the ones who suffer most, and we need the climate fund to transfer money. So why don't you send 100 million to those countries rather than fix our own shop?
That's a very fair challenge. And I was thinking myself about that comment you would give. So let me solve it very quickly. So appreciate that you offer 200 million on behalf of the government. The first 100 million is going for the purpose that Peter said, and the second 100 million you can spend the way I advise you. But I agree with the remark of Peter.
Dave, what do you need from science? How can they help?
I'll maybe quote one of our customers here in the Netherlands, because we were having a discussion of we're changing our branding, etc. And he said, "I don't care what you call yourself. What I want is your brains." And so to some extent, it's the same answer. What we need are your brains. But I think those brains have to be applied maybe to practical solutions. So working together on projects that, if you like, are maybe the right mixture of long-term and short-term, because I think it's important we get the balance there. And projects that will lead to, very clearly to pragmatic solutions. So it's either tools or softwares or ways of addressing some of the issues that can lead to not only business, because I'm a businessman at the end of the day, but also solutions that help our customers, which is the most important part of this, because our customers, and they can be anybody from governments to other companies to NGOs. So that's, for me, is the key. It's your brains I want, but brains applied science rather than theoretical science.
Great. We have 6 minutes left. That means 1 minute per panelist. We are in Rotterdam, where the culture is one of niet lullen, maar poetsen, which translates freely as we like action better than words. Right? So let me start at Roger. Having heard this, all the possibilities to collaborate with science, with insurance, innovation, adaptation, building business case, what are you going to do differently after having been on this panel in your business tomorrow? The same question will come to all of you, so be prepared. Roger.
No, I think it's partly a repetition of some of the key messages, and that is that for
doing, no words, doing.
For adaptation, you require practical business models that run across many parties. So what you practically need to do is you need to engage with the community and work together. Okay. As an example, we have the regional steel agenda. So we participate with all stakeholders in the region, businesses, schools, etc. We make these resources maps and these energies maps and find the opportunities together. And climate adaptation is then an integral part of that discussion. So it is about recognizing the complexity and practically work with stakeholders to resolve them and build a business case.
Thanks. David.
Okay, most of our customers are actually not here at this conference. So there aren't that many large shipping companies, oil and gas companies, utilities, etc. here. So although we say there's some private sector, it actually isn't representing, by and large, my customers. So one of the things I want to go back to is we have many people who are in organizing committees of similar types of events, is encourage them to get adaptation on the agenda of those sectorial conferences, so we can make sure that this issue is not something that is a bubble that we're talking about in this room and elsewhere, but really is driving now down into those industries.
But there's also 500 scientists here who are seeking to get your business card and you're there. So what are you going to do?
Well, they send me a business card. I mean, I think this is an important part, is to try and get them on the agendas as well of those conferences.
Okay, cool. Frank?
What this discussion learned me is that what I'm going to do different tomorrow is that we way more outspoken and way more clearer on the solutions we can provide, because there are excuses about complexity, data, and all the other kind of things. But we have clear solutions as well, so we make them more clearer and more visible than we did in the past. And the second thing is about collaboration with academic world. Be more clear also there what we need. It's not about being used as an excuse to win the project, but really smart solutions that we can bring to the market, which academic world struggles with, and we can bring better. And having that good kind of collaboration, develop that further, and work together to really do something which is rather close, I would say.
Great. Christine?
Well, for Rotterdam, I think must be more aggressive sales of tank cleaning with a high improved safety and better sludge treatment, traceability of the waste that's handled, and also less downtime. Whereas for the NG Group and overall, I think even more bring together our different clients across industries, because we have a role. We can have a role as an agent for collaboration and resource utilization.
Great. Feike?
First of all, thank you, Peter, good friend, who works very hard with World Business Council on mitigation and adaptation. So great. And by the way, this conference also helped my further insight. So appreciate to be here and to be interactive with you. What will we do? Make the company future-proof and not having our own Kodak moment. I grant the Kodak moments only to Kodak and other companies, but not to ourselves. So make our own company future-proof. How do we do that? Reduce, enable, advocate. Reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions. Use more sustainable, renewable energy. Prepare on a price on carbon. Enable, work out the different products in the supply chain, whether it is in food or alternative energies or whatever, that we provide sustainability for our customers. Advocate, being here and advocating for the right thing. I realize you cannot be successful, don't even dare to call yourself successful if you live in a world that fails.
Thank you. Sandeep?
Very good. Well, I'm inspired by some of the questions and insights from the audience today. So from the person who talked about small and medium enterprises here, we have a $500 million startup fund that we have dedicated to investing in startups in the disruptive technology field. Perhaps we can focus on a lot of that on startups that are disrupting this whole climate adaptation and climate mitigation area. The second is the gentleman in the back who talked about farmers. I was wondering, we have built some digital farming solutions that we have perhaps not aggressively taken to market for the benefit of farmers at large, and we have a number of agricultural clients. So perhaps we should be doing that more, and I'm inspired by your comment that there is no farmer on the panel, so I will represent the farmer on the panel to the extent I can and take that solution there. Finally, I think it is what Feike said. He made a far more passionate case for developing countries than I did, so I will be inspired by that and make a much more passionate case for developing countries in the future. But this whole reducing our footprint, enabling the future, and advocating is applicable to large companies like DSM or large companies like Infosys. Our pledge to become carbon neutral by 2018 is not just for ourselves, but also for the larger society at large around us and impacting them positively. Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. The moderator is not excused of having to take action himself, so I commit to do more on collaboration, particularly with universities and science. We need to work harder on creating risk-based tools, a language that business can use. And very concretely, I'll pick up the phone this afternoon to talk to the task force for climate-related disclosures to make sure there's a chapter on adaptation in there as well, because that will change the way financial markets work. First business day ever in the Adaptation Futures Conference. First business people sitting in the panel talking to you. I hope you learned as much as I did. Please thank an amazing panel. Thank you very much.